Desperation has stages. First comes the rational calculation. You inventory your supplies, count the days, ration what remains, make plans that assume competence and luck in equal measure. Then comes the bargaining. Maybe you can stretch 3 days of food into 5. Maybe the weather will improve. Maybe you'll stumble onto a village, a road, salvation delivered by probability and prayer. Then comes the madness. That's when you start looking at plants you've spent your entire life knowing were poison and thinking, but what if I'm wrong? Garrett Ashfeld had reached the what if I'm wrong stage approximately 4 hours ago. The Whispering Reach wasn't called that because of wind through the trees or poetic metaphor. It was called that because people who entered claimed to hear voices, their own names whispered by dead relatives, promises of safety just around the next hill. Come deeper, the forest said. Come further. We have what you need. Most people who listened to those whispers didn't come back. The king's decree was simple. Any man who enters the Whispering Reach forfeits protection of the crown. Simple, direct, unambiguous. Garrett had been stripped of crown protection 6 months earlier anyway, so the decree seemed somewhat redundant. The crime had been disobedience, specifically refusing a direct order from Commander Harrow to execute prisoners. Orc prisoners, which technically made them enemy combatants. But they'd also been unarmed, injured, bound, and one of them had been maybe 15 years old with fear in his eyes that looked exactly the same as human fear. Garrett had said no. Harrow had said that no wasn't an option. Garrett had said it anyway. 6 months of exile later, here he was staring at a flower that was absolutely, definitely, 100% going to kill him if he ate it. Moon petals grew in shadow. The blooms were silver white, luminescent even in daylight, with petals that looked soft as silk. Beautiful, delicate, deadly. Every child in the kingdom learned about moon petals in their first survival lesson. Never eat the pretty white flowers. They'll burn you from inside. You'll die slow and painful and stupid. Garrett's stomach had stopped growling 3 days ago. Now it just ached, constant, present. A reminder that the body has needs that don't care about wisdom or survival instincts or royal decrees. He picked one of the flowers. The petals felt exactly as soft as they looked, almost apologetic in their texture, like nature was saying sorry in advance for what came next. He ate it. The taste was contradictory, bitter leaves that made his mouth pucker, sweet petals that dissolved like sugar on his tongue. His body's immediate response was rejection, gagging, the certainty that he'd made a terrible mistake. Then the fire started. It began in his chest, spreading outward through his veins like liquid heat. His vision folded inward. Colors became too bright. Shadows became solid. The ground rushed up to meet him with the inevitability of gravity. His last coherent thought was that at least he wouldn't be hungry anymore. His second to last thought was that dying alone in a cursed forest was a pathetic ending for someone who'd once been the king's personal tracker. Then darkness took him, and thinking stopped being an option. Zarya Ironpeak knew the smell of death intimately. Battlefields had taught her. Villages burned during raids had reinforced the lesson. Her own hands, stained more times than she cared to count, had provided ongoing education. Death smelled like copper and rot, sweet and metallic at once, the scent of endings. But this wasn't death she was smelling now. This was stupidity. The human was face down in a patch of moon petals, which explained everything. No one ate moon petals, not orcs, not humans, not even the dumbest forest creature had that particular death wish. Zarya should have kept walking. She was on border patrol. Third time this month, as chieftain of the Stoneheart clan, she could have delegated this duty. Most leaders did. But Zarya had learned that respect came from shared hardship, not from sitting on a throne while others risked their lives. Besides, the forest was quiet, peaceful in a way the settlement never was. The human was still breathing, barely, shallow gasps that sounded like drowning on air. She nudged him with her boot. No response. Harder nudge. Nothing. Pitiful way to die, she said to the trees. She should have kept walking. Should have let nature handle what was clearly natural selection in action. The world had too many stupid humans already. One less wouldn't change anything. But the way he was curled on his side, hands clutched against his stomach, like he could physically hold the poison inside if he just squeezed hard enough, reminded her of someone. Her younger cousin had eaten moon petals once, a dare from older warriors who should have known better. Zarya had been 16. She'd dragged that cousin 8 miles to the clan healer, who'd spent 4 days forcing antidotes down his throat until the fever broke. Her cousin had been 9 years old and eating moon petals because children were idiots. This human was clearly older than 9 and eating them because, why? She checked his belongings. Leather pack, empty. Water skin, empty. Hunting bow, unstrung. Quiver with 2 arrows. 2 arrows. That was the number you ended up with when you'd been living on borrowed time for far too long. Zarya made a decision she knew she'd regret. The abandoned way station was 2 miles northeast, built decades ago when humans first tried to colonize the borderlands. Most of those stations were rubble now. This one had survived by being unremarkable, too small to bother destroying, too hidden to be worth the effort. Dragging an unconscious human through 2 miles of forest violated approximately 17 protocols. As chieftain, she was supposed to kill enemies on sight, or capture them for information, or at minimum, leave them to their fate. Saving them wasn't on the approved list. She dragged him anyway. Her muscles remembered the motion. Fireman's carry across her shoulders. His weight was less than she expected. Humans were lighter than orcs. Less muscle density, frailer bones. Built for speed rather than endurance. By the time she reached the way station, the sun was setting fast. Winter in the Whispering Reach didn't negotiate. It arrived with absolute certainty and made itself comfortable in your bones. The way station was exactly as she remembered. One room, stone fireplace, wooden floor with gaps wide enough to lose coins through, zero furniture. Someone had looted everything worth taking years ago. She dropped the human in the corner, farthest from the door. He hit the ground with a sound like dead weight, which accurately described his current state. The fever was worsening. She could see it in the flush spreading across his face. The sweat despite the cold. Moon petal poisoning, killed slowly. 12 to 15 hours of your body cooking from inside. If you survived the first night, you'd probably live. Most didn't survive the first night. Zarya built a fire. Not out of compassion, she needed heat. The temperature was already dropping toward lethal, and she had no intention of freezing to death because she'd wasted daylight dragging a dying human to shelter. She sat against the wall opposite him, watching flames throw shadows across bare walls. This was the point where smart people left. Mission accomplished. Shelter provided. Whether he lived or died was between him and whatever gods humans worshipped. But leaving meant 2 miles of night forest. And night forest in winter was where even orc chieftains sometimes vanished. The smart move was to wait until dawn. The problem with waiting was the cold. Fire heated air. Air moved, escaped through cracks and gaps and every flaw in decade-old construction. Air didn't trap warmth, didn't hold it close, didn't keep you alive when winter decided to stop being gentle. Bodies, though, bodies were excellent insulation. Zarya watched the human's breathing deteriorate, watched shivers progress from occasional to constant, watched his lips fade from pink to blue to something approaching gray. He was going to, not from poison, the fever was peaking, starting to break, but from exposure, from cold, from nature's cruel joke of surviving the poison just to freeze 6 feet from a fire. She could let it happen, would be cleaner, easier to explain. Found a human dying, gave him shelter. Not my fault it wasn't enough. Clean, simple, cowardly. Zarya stood, crossed the room, lay down beside him. The cold hit immediately. He was ice, not metaphorically, literally ice-cold skin, muscles locked rigid from shivers. Breath coming in gasps that fogged despite the nearby fire. She wrapped her arms around him and pulled him against her chest. Heat transfer was basic biology. Orcs ran warmer than humans, higher metabolism, denser muscle tissue, combat advantages disguised as physiology. Right now, it just made her an extremely overqualified blanket. His shivers gradually calmed, breathing evened. The gray color faded from his lips. And Zarya, chieftain of the Stoneheart clan, first female leader in 3 generations, holder of 9 battle scars, and absolutely zero patience for weakness, lay on a freezing floor holding an enemy she should have killed. She wondered what her warriors would say if they could see her now. Probably something involving the words weak and traitor and dishonor. The fire crackled. Wind howled outside. Somewhere in the space between midnight and morning, exhaustion won and she fell asleep. Garrett woke to three sensations: warmth, pain, wrongness. The warmth came from behind him, solid, present, breathing. The pain came from everywhere, but especially his stomach, which felt like someone had spent the night using it for percussion practice. The wrongness came from the absolute certainty that the warmth behind him was shaped incorrectly to be human. He opened his eyes slowly. Dawn light filtered through gaps in walls he didn't recognize. He was in a room he'd never seen, and wrapped around him, still asleep, was an orc. Not just any orc. He knew who she was. Everyone did. Zarya Ironpeak, chieftain of the Stoneheart clan. The orc who'd won her position 3 years ago by challenging the previous chieftain to single combat and winning. The orc who'd led her warriors through 6 major engagements without a single loss. The orc who was, according to every human intelligence report, ruthless and strategic and absolutely not the type to rescue dying enemies and hold them through the night. Yet her arm was draped across his chest, her breath was warm against the back of his neck. And if he moved it even slightly, she was going to wake up and probably kill him. For what? Being held by her while unconscious? Not exactly his choice. He held very still. Minutes passed like hours. The sun climbed. Eventually, inevitably, she stirred. The moment she realized their position was obvious, her entire body went rigid. Then her arm retracted from his chest with the speed of someone who just discovered they were embracing a snake. Garrett sat up carefully, turned to face her. They stared at each other. In his 30 years, Garrett had encountered orcs exactly 6 times. Twice at distance during skirmishes. 3 times close enough to fight, which had ended with him bleeding and running. Once close enough to spare, which had ended with his exile. Every time, they'd been armored. Armed, painted for war, violence incarnate. Zarya was wearing simple leather vest and trousers. No armor, no weapons visible, no war paint. Her green skin bore scars, a long one across her left shoulder, smaller ones on her knuckles, but no decoration. Her dark hair was long, currently falling across her face in a way that made her look less like a legendary warrior and more like someone who'd had a confusing night. "You're alive," she said finally. "Apparently. You ate moon petals." "I was hungry." "Moon petals aren't food." "I noticed." Silence stretched. Garrett broke it. "Why?" "Why what?" "Why am I alive? You could have left me." "I needed shelter. You happened to be here." "That doesn't explain." He gestured vaguely at where they'd been lying. "You were freezing. I was warm. Winter doesn't care about politics." She stood, brushing dirt from her clothes. "You should leave. Go back to wherever you came from." "I'm exiled. There's no going back." She turned to look at him. "Exiled for what?" "Refusing to execute prisoners." "Orders are orders, apparently." I disagreed. Something flickered in her expression. "The prisoners at Ravencross, those were my warriors. They died anyway. Different human patrol, less squeamish, Commander." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. You didn't kill them. You just lost everything trying to save them." She turned to the door. "We're not so different." "How do you figure?" "We both made choices that made our people hate us. You're exiled. I'm a chieftain that half my warriors want to overthrow because I'm not violent enough." She laughed without humor. "We're both monsters to someone." Garrett stood slowly, legs shaky but functional. "So what now?" "Now you leave. I leave. We forget this happened." "Will you forget?" Zarya didn't answer, just stepped into the morning and disappeared into the trees. 4 days later, Garrett was still thinking about green skin, dark hair, and the warmth of someone who should have been his enemy. Exile gave you time to think. Too much time. Time to question every decision. Time to wonder if you did the right thing or just the thing that felt right in the moment. He'd made camp in a small cave a mile from where the moon petal incident occurred. Defensible, dry, close enough to a stream that starvation wasn't his primary concern anymore. Primary concern was now figuring out what had happened in that way station. Enemies didn't save each other. That was basic logic. You killed your enemy, or captured them, or left them to die. You didn't drag them to shelter and keep them alive through the night. He was still thinking about this when she appeared again. Garrett heard her approach, footsteps that weren't particularly trying to be quiet. She emerged from the tree line like she'd walked this path before. "You're still here," Zarya said. "Didn't have anywhere else to be. The reach is dangerous for humans. It's dangerous for everyone. That's why it's forbidden." She sat on a fallen log near his fire, uninvited but not unwelcome. Evening sun caught her face at an angle that made her scars visible. "Why are you here?" Garrett asked. "Patrol route." "Your patrol route brings you past my camp?" "Apparently." They sat in silence. The fire crackled. Somewhere distant, a bird called and got no answer. "Can I ask you something?" Garrett said. "You can ask." "Why did you really save me?" "The truth." Zarya was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was careful. "My cousin almost died eating moon petals when he was 9. Stupid dare. I found him, dragged him to our healer, sat with him for 4 days while the fever broke." She paused. "He survived. Grew up, dated 3 years ago in battle against humans. Arrow through the throat. Clean shot. Professional." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He died a warrior. That's what he wanted." She looked at Garrett. "But when I saw you lying there, same poison, same expression, I couldn't leave you. Made no sense. Still doesn't. But I couldn't. Makes sense to me." "How?" "Because you're not a monster, neither am I. And maybe that's the problem with this whole war." She smiled, first real smile he'd seen from her. "The war chiefs would have my head if they heard that. Good thing I won't tell them." She visited twice more that week, then 3 times the next, each time staying longer, each conversation going deeper. They talked about growing up in worlds that hated each other, about losing family to wars neither had started, about the weight of decisions that determined whether people lived or died. "Do you ever regret it?" Garrett asked during one visit, taking leadership. "Every day," Zarya said without hesitation. "Being chieftain means everyone watches everything. Every decision gets questioned. Every time I choose mercy over violence, half my clan thinks I'm weak. Every time I choose violence, I hate myself. So why continue? Because someone has to. And if I step down, they'll choose someone who thinks war is the answer to everything." She looked at him. "What about you? Regret refusing those orders?" "Not once. I lost everything, but I kept the one thing that mattered. I can still look at myself." "That's rare." "So is an orc chieftain who thinks war is bad strategy." "I never said war was bad strategy. I said endless war was bad strategy. There's a difference." She stood, preparing to leave. "War has a purpose. It ends things. But this war between your people and mine just kills in circles. No one wins. So why not stop?" "Because I'm one chieftain in a world of warriors who think peace is weakness. And you're one exiled human in a forest. Neither of us has the power to stop anything." She left, but she kept coming back. It was during the 6th week that everything changed. Garrett had caught a deer. Actual meat for the first time in months. He was field dressing it when Zarya appeared earlier than usual. "You hunt well," she observed. "Former royal tracker. It's the one skill I have. You could teach others. My people need better hunters." "Your people would kill me on sight." "Not if I vouched for you." She sat across from him. "You're good at something we need. You have no loyalty to any human kingdom. You've proven you'd rather starve than hurt civilians. We could use someone like you. Your warriors would never accept it. A human in an orc clan. They'd hate it, which is exactly why I want to do it." She smiled. "Nothing challenges rigid thinking like forcing people to confront their assumptions. You want to use me as a political statement. I want to use you as proof that enemies can become allies if both sides stop being idiots long enough to try." Garrett cleaned his knife slowly. "What would I have to do?" "Hunt. Teach hunting. Show up and be human where humans aren't supposed to exist. Challenge every warrior who thinks they know what humans are capable of. And if they challenge me to fight, then you fight. If you lose, you lose. But at least you'll lose trying instead of starving alone." He thought about it. about 6 months of exile and loneliness, about a chieftain who'd saved him for no rational reason and kept returning for even less rational ones, about the possibility that maybe something different could exist. "When do we start?" he asked. "Tomorrow, dawn. Pack light." She stood to leave, then paused. "Garrett, yeah, this is probably a terrible idea." "Probably, Tony. We'll both likely regret it." "Definitely." "Good, as long as we're clear." She disappeared into the trees and Garrett sat with his half-dressed deer, thinking about terrible ideas and how the best ones usually were. The next morning she returned as promised. They walked together through the Whispering Reach toward Orc territory, and with each step, Garrett felt his old life falling away and the terror of a new one taking its place. Bringing a human into Orc territory was objectively one of the stupider things Zarya had done as chieftain. It ranked somewhere between told the war chiefs their tactics were outdated and publicly questioned whether endless war was the best use of resources. Both of those decisions had nearly gotten her killed. This one probably would, but Garrett was right. Doing the right thing and doing the thing that kept you alive were often completely different choices. The Stoneheart clan lived in mountain valleys north of the Whispering Reach. Garrett's first sight of their settlement made him stop walking. It wasn't what he'd expected. Human stories about orc settlements involve skulls and chaos and architecture that looked like organized violence. What Garrett saw instead was a village. Stone buildings with thatched roofs, smoke from chimneys, children, and actual orc children, playing with sticks and a ball, families working together on weapon maintenance and food preparation. "You're staring," Zarya said. "I expected something different." "Skulls and blood? Sorry to disappoint, we save those for festivals." They walked through the settlement. Every orc they passed stopped to stare. Children stopped playing. Families stopped talking. Warriors, massive figures twice Garrett's size, just watched. No one attacked. No one shouted. They just stared with expressions ranging from confusion to disgust to curiosity. Zarya led him to the largest building, a longhouse with carved posts flanking the entrance. Inside was a large room with a fire pit in the center and seating arranged around it. A dozen orcs waited. War chiefs? Garrett recognized the type. Same energy as human commanders. Confident, scarred, absolutely convinced they knew better than everyone else. "You brought a human to council," one said. Tall, arms like tree trunks, voice like gravel. "I did, Thrak," Zarya said simply. "Why?" "Because I'm chieftain, and I decided to." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer you're getting." She gestured for Garrett to sit. He did, acutely aware he was the smallest, weakest, most killable person in the room. "This human was exiled from his kingdom for refusing to execute civilians," Zarya continued. "He's a skilled hunter and tracker. He has no loyalty to any human nation, and I vouched for him." "You vouched for prey," another war chief said, an older female with scars covering half her face. "Humans aren't warriors. They're weak and treacherous." "He refused an orders that would have saved his career because they violated his principles," Zarya countered. "That's not cowardly. One exception doesn't change the rule." "Maybe the rule is wrong. Maybe we've spent so long hating humans we forgot to check if our hatred still makes sense." Uproar, multiple chiefs speaking at once, voices overlapping in anger and disbelief. Zarya let it continue for exactly 30 seconds. Then she stood and slammed her fist on the table hard enough to crack it. Silence. "You want to challenge my decision?" she said quietly. "Fine. Any warrior who thinks they know better can face me in the circle. Winner decides what happens to the human." No one moved. "That's what I thought." She sat. "The human stays. He hunts, he teaches, and every one of you will treat him with the same respect you'd show any clan member. Or you'll explain to me personally why my direct order isn't worth following." The meeting continued. Garrett barely heard it. Too busy processing that an orc chieftain had just threatened her own war chiefs on behalf of someone she'd met 6 weeks ago. After the council ended, she found him outside. "That went well," Garrett said. "That went terribly. But they'll tolerate you now." She looked at him. "Why are you doing this? Really?" "Because 6 weeks ago you held me while I was dying. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, I stopped seeing an enemy and started seeing a person. And I can't unsee that. This could get us both killed. Probably, but at least it'll be interesting. She smiled. At least there's that. The next 3 months were the hardest of Garrett's life. Learning to exist in an orc clan as the only human required rewriting everything he thought he knew about survival. The physical challenges were manageable. He was a skilled hunter. His tracking abilities earned respect faster than expected. The social challenges were another matter entirely. Orcs didn't do subtle. If they liked you, they showed it. If they hated you, they showed that too. No polite pretending, no social niceties. Just blunt communication that left no room for misunderstanding. Most of them hated him at first. Thrake, the war chief, made his opinion clear daily. Would accidentally shoulder-check Garrett hard enough to knock him down. Would question his hunts, his methods, his existence. Would loudly wonder how long before the weakling human ran back to his own kind. Garrett took it, partly because fighting back would prove nothing. Mostly because Thrake was literally twice his size and could probably break him in half. But gradually, things shifted. The day Garrett tracked a winter stag for 8 hours and brought it back, 3 warriors who'd never spoken to him nodded in acknowledgement. The day he taught younger orcs how to set snares that didn't require brute strength, one of them actually thanked him. The day he hunted alongside a full war party and kept pace for 10 miles through rough terrain, Thrak stopped sneering and started ignoring him instead. Progress came in small increments. Through it all, Zortgoy was there. Not constantly, she had a clan to run, but regularly enough that Garrett always knew she was watching. They fell into a pattern. She'd find him after council meetings or during evening meals. They'd talk about clan politics, about human kingdoms, about the war neither wanted but neither could stop. "Do you regret it?" Garrett asked her one night. They sat at the settlement's edge, looking out at the forest below. "Bringing you here? Ask me again in 6 months. That bad? Half my war chiefs think you're a spy. The other half think I'm losing my mind. A few are planning to challenge my leadership come spring. Because of me? Because of everything. You're just the most visible symptom." She was quiet. "Thrake asked me yesterday why I don't just kill you and end the controversy." "What did you say?" "I told him that killing someone to make other people comfortable was exactly the thinking that keeps this war going." She looked at Garrett. "Then I told him if he had a problem with my leadership, he was welcome to challenge me." "What did he say?" "Nothing, because he knows I'd win. But he's not wrong that I'm making everything harder by keeping you alive." "So why do it?" She didn't answer immediately. Finally, "Because when I held you that night, I made a choice. And I don't unmake choices just because they get difficult." She stood. "Also, you're the only person in this clan I can talk to who doesn't want something from me. Everyone else wants me to be more violent, more aggressive, more traditional. You just let me be tired sometimes." "Is that allowed? Chieftains being tired?" "It's frowned upon." She smiled slightly. "I'm doing it anyway." Winter deepened. The clan prepared for the hardest months. Garrett threw himself into hunting with intensity that surprised even him. Partly to prove his worth, partly because staying busy meant not thinking about how complicated his life had become. Mara, the human healer who'd somehow ended up with the clan decades ago, started talking to him, which mostly meant she talked at him while sorting herbs. "Rosemary's being stubborn today," she'd say. "Won't dry properly. I told him, 'Rosemary, if you don't cooperate, someone's going to die of infection, and it'll be your fault.' But does he listen?" Garrett learned to just nod. Kresh, the young scout who collected human artifacts, started showing Garrett his collection. Buttons, cloth fragments, broken tools, things that had meaning only because Kresh decided they did. "This button," Kresh explained, holding something small and wooden, "came from a battlefield 4 years ago. I found it next to a dead human soldier. Young, maybe 20, and I thought he chose this button. Sewed it on himself. It mattered to him." He looked at Garrett. "Does that sound stupid?" "No, it sounds like you understand something most people forget." "What's that?" "That every person we kill is someone who cared about buttons." Kresh nodded slowly, carefully placed the button back in his collection. Small moments, small connections, small evidence that enemies could become something else. Then Commander Harrow showed up. Garrett was returning from a hunt when he saw the commotion. A group of human soldiers at the settlement boundary, not attacking, just standing there. Weapons visible but not drawn. A parley. And at the front, unmistakable, was Commander Harrow, his former mentor, his former commander, the man who'd declared him a deserter for refusing orders. Zarya was already there, warriors flanking her. The two groups faced each other across 50 feet of neutral ground. Garrett should have hidden. He walked toward the confrontation instead. "Garrett," Harrow called out as he approached, "I hoped we'd find you here." "Commander?" "Still using my rank. Old habits." Harrow's eyes swept over him. "You look well. Better than expected for a deserter living with orcs." "What do you want?" "To talk. Just talk. I came under truce flag. The orc chieftain accepted." Zarya's expression said she'd accepted under protest, but she nodded confirmation. "Why?" Garrett asked. "Because the kingdom wants to make you an offer. Come back." "Full pardon." "Reinstatement as royal tracker. All charges dropped. The king himself authorized it. You were right about the executions. We reviewed the incident. It was a mistake. The king acknowledges that now. Too late for the prisoners." "Yes, but not too late for you." Harrow's voice was earnest. "Come home, Garrett. You don't belong here. These are orcs. They're not your people. Neither are you, not anymore. Because we made one mistake. Because you made that mistake and then exiled me for not making it with you." Garrett felt old anger rising. "I did my job. I followed every order until you ordered me to commit murder. And when I refused, you declared me a traitor and sent me to die." "I didn't send you to die. I sent you into exile." "Same thing. You just let nature do the killing." Harrow was quiet. "You're right. I was wrong. We were wrong. That's why I'm here. To fix it." "You can't fix it. Those people are still dead." "You're still—" Harrow stopped. "You're still what?" "Different. I'm different. I've seen things here that humans aren't supposed to see. These people aren't monsters. They're just people at war so long they've forgotten how to be anything else. They're orcs, the enemy. That's how war works." "Maybe that's the problem." Harrow looked past Garrett to where Zarya stood. "She's gotten to you. She saved my life, then let me stay when every warrior wanted me dead. Then proved that enemies can become allies if both sides stop being idiots. And what happens when the war starts again? Whose side will you be on?" Garrett didn't have an answer, because Harrow was right. The peace was temporary. Eventually someone would attack. Retribution would follow. The cycle would continue. "I can't go back," Garrett said finally. "Even if I wanted to. I can't unsee what I've seen." "Then what will you do?" "I don't know, but I won't do it by pretending orcs are monsters so I can feel better about killing them." Harrow studied him, nodded slowly. "I see. Then I suppose there's nothing more to say. For what it's worth, Garrett, I am sorry. You were a good soldier. You would have been a great commander." "I was never going to be commander. I asked too many questions." "Yes, you did." Harrow turned to his men. "Let's go." They left. Garrett watched them disappear, feeling like he'd just closed a door he could never reopen. Zarya approached. "That was your former mentor?" "Yes." "He wanted you back?" "Yes." "But you said no." "Yes." "Why?" Garrett looked at her, at the settlement behind her, at the life he'd accidentally built in enemy territory. "Because going back means forgetting, and I don't want to forget." She nodded, didn't say anything more. Didn't need to. But something had shifted. Garrett felt it like weight settling in his chest. The war chiefs made their move 3 weeks later. Garrett heard the shouting first. Deep voices raised in anger from the longhouse. He was at the settlement's edge, but he dropped everything and ran. Inside the longhouse, Zarya stood in the center of the circle. Around her, 8 war chiefs in a formation that was clearly coordinated, accusatory. "You've gone too far," Thrak was saying. "The human stays. The raids stop. You question every battle plan. You refuse retaliation when humans attack. This isn't leadership. This is cowardice." "I'm preventing unnecessary deaths," Zarya said, voice level. "That's not cowardice. That's strategy. Strategy is killing our enemies before they kill us. And where does that end? When every human is dead? When every orc is dead? When there's nothing left?" "It ends when we win. We're not winning, we're just dying slower. Thrak stepped closer. I'm challenging your leadership. Circle combat tomorrow at dawn. You lose. You step down. Zarya didn't flinch. Accepted. The word hung like a blade. Garrett felt ice in his stomach. Circle combat meant fight to yield or death. And while Zarya was skilled, Thrak was 7 feet of muscle and rage with 20 years of experience. The war chiefs filed out. Zarya stayed, sitting heavily on a bench. Garrett approached. You don't have to accept. Yes, I do. If I refuse, it means I'm weak. They'll vote me out anyway. You'll lose. She looked at him. Maybe, maybe not. He's bigger, stronger, and angrier. I can't win through strength, I know, but I can win through strategy. I've beaten bigger opponents before. Not in formal circle combat. If I lose, they'll elect someone who will turn the clan into a war machine. More death, more fighting, more endless cycle. She touched his shoulder briefly. But I won't lose. She said it with such certainty that Garrett almost believed her. Dawn came too fast. The entire clan gathered in the central clearing. Circle combat was tradition. A ring of warriors forming the boundary. No weapons. Fight until one yielded or couldn't continue. Zarya entered first. No armor, just leather bindings on her hands and determination in her eyes. Thralk entered second. Pure violence waiting to happen. They faced each other. The clan elder raised his hand. Begin. A Thrak charged immediately. The smart move would have been to dodge. Instead, Zarya met him head-on. They collided like thunder. Thrak's momentum should have flattened her. Instead, she braced, absorbed the impact, and used his force to spin him off balance. He stumbled, recovered, came at her again. The fight was brutal. Thrak landed hits that would have killed a smaller opponent. Zarya took them, gave back worse, kept moving. He was stronger. She was faster. He was relentless. She was strategic. Minutes passed, both bleeding, both breathing hard, neither yielding. Garrett watched with his heart trying to break through his ribs. Then Thrak made a mistake. Overextended on a punch. Left his side exposed for half a second. Zarya took it. Hit him in the ribs with everything she had, once, twice, 3 times in the same spot. Something cracked. Thrak roared, swung wildly. Zarya ducked under it, came up inside his guard and hit him in the throat. Not hard enough to kill, hard enough to remind him she could have. He dropped to one knee. Yield, Zarya said quietly. Thrak's face was rage and pain and humiliation mixed. For a long moment, Garrett thought he'd refuse. Then, I yield. The circle erupted. Some cheered. Others looked disgusted. All looked convinced. Zarya had won. She helped Thrak to his feet. He shook her off, walked out without looking back. The elder raised his voice. The challenge is met. The chieftain stands. The clan dispersed. Zarya stood alone in the center, bleeding from a dozen places, breathing like she'd just run 10 miles. Garrett approached. You won. Barely. Still counts. She smiled slightly. Barely counts. Also true. What happens now? Now I rule a clan where half the warriors hate me. Same as before. Just slightly fewer assassination attempts. That's progress. Tell me that after the next 3 months. They walked back together. And Garrett realized that watching someone you cared about nearly die was significantly worse than nearly dying yourself. He cared about her. When exactly that had happened, he couldn't say. But it was true, and terrifying, and the worst possible complication. But it was true. 3 months passed, spring came, and with spring came raids. Human villages reported orc attacks, orc settlements reported human retaliation. The careful peace shattered like ice in sunlight. Zarya tried to limit involvement, sent defensive patrols instead of offensive ones, refused to authorize raids, negotiated when possible. The war chiefs hated it. Warriors grumbled. Tensions built. Garrett found himself in an impossible position, living with orcs while humans died. I don't know what to do, he told Zarya one evening. They were in her private quarters, a small room serving as both office and living space. Every report of human deaths feels like failure. But every orc death feels the same. I can't win this. Neither can I, Zarya said. She was sorting reports, expression exhausted. I stopped a raid last week. The warriors were furious. Thrak told me I was choosing humans over orcs. He's not entirely wrong. What did you say? I said I was choosing living warriors over dead ones. That every raid costs us fighters we can't replace. She looked up. But that's not the full truth. What is? I'm choosing you. Garrett went very still. I'm choosing you, she repeated quietly. Every time I stop a raid, I'm thinking about whether you could live with me authorizing it. Every time I negotiate instead of fighting, I'm thinking about what kind of chieftain you'd respect. I'm not making decisions based on strategy anymore. I'm making them based on, she stopped. Based on what? On not wanting to be someone you'd hate. The words hung between them. I don't hate you, Garrett said. I couldn't hate you if I tried. You should, I'm an orc. You're human, this is impossible. I know. I've been telling myself that for months. He moved closer. Hasn't helped. They looked at each other. Two enemies who'd accidentally become something else. Two people from different species, different worlds. Two idiots who'd somehow fallen into something neither wanted and both needed. This is a really bad idea, Zarya said. The worst, Garrett agreed. It'll make everything harder. Definitely. We'll both probably die because of it. Very likely. She kissed him anyway. Clumsy, desperate, tasting like terrible decisions made at exactly the right time. Wrong in every way that mattered. Perfect in every way that didn't. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Zarya said, "We can't tell anyone." Agreed. This doesn't change anything. Except everything. Except everything, she confirmed. They lasted 2 weeks before someone figured it out. Kresh, the young scout, noticed them standing too close during a council meeting. Noticed the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. "You're together," he said to Garrett one afternoon. Not a question. Garrett considered lying, decided against it. Yes. Does she know you're together? She's the one I'm together with, so yes. Kresh processed this. That's very bad. I know. The war chiefs will kill you both. Probably. But you're doing it anyway. Apparently. Why? Garrett thought about it. Because being alone was killing me anyway. At least this way I'm alive first. Kresh nodded slowly. That's the most orc thing you've ever said. Is that good? I have no idea. Word spread, not from Kresh, but secrets that big have a way of escaping. The war chiefs confronted her publicly. You're sleeping with the human, Thrake said, an accusation. Zarya didn't deny it. My personal life is none of your concern. It's all our concern when our chieftain betrays her own kind. I haven't betrayed anyone. You're with a human. Thrax stopped himself, contaminating yourself, polluting the bloodline, dishonoring the clan. I'm with someone who respects me, Zarya said quietly, someone who doesn't question my every decision or challenge my authority daily, someone who treats me like a person instead of a war machine. If that's betrayal, then yes, I'm guilty. The council erupted, multiple chiefs shouting, demands for removal, calls for circle combat, one warrior suggesting Garrett be executed immediately. Zarya let it continue for 30 seconds. Then she stood. Anyone who wants to challenge me, do it. Circle now, one at a time or all at once. I don't care. She looked around. But understand this, I'm not stepping down. I'm not ending this relationship. And I'm not apologizing for choosing someone who makes me better instead of someone who makes me traditional. No one moved. That's what I thought. She walked out. Garrett found her later at the settlement's edge. That went well, he said. They'll vote me out within a week. Then we leave together. And abandon the clan to Thrax's leadership? He'll turn them into raiders within a month. More death, more war. So what do we do? I don't know. She was quiet. Maybe nothing we do matters. Maybe the war continues regardless. Maybe we're just two people trying to stop an avalanche. Maybe, but we're trying. Is trying enough? It has to be. They stood watching the sun set over territory that had somehow become home. The vote came 4 days later. 8 war chiefs voted to remove her. 4 voted for her to stay. The elder abstained, which meant by tradition the decision fell to the warriors. Democracy in an orc clan was loud, chaotic, and terrifying. Every warrior over combat age got a voice. Every voice was shouted at maximum volume. The debate lasted 6 hours. Arguments for removal. She's weak, she's compromised. She's choosing a human over her own kind. She's preventing necessary violence. She's dishonoring tradition. Arguments for keeping her. She's kept us alive through 3 winters. She's won every challenge. She's prevented meaningless deaths. She's brave enough to make unpopular choices. She's showing strength, not weakness. In the end, it came down to 1 vote. Thrak stood. Everyone went silent. I hate that she's with a human, Thrak said. I think it's disgusting. I think it weakens us. I think it sends the wrong message. He paused. But she beat me in circle combat, and Orc law says that means something. So I vote she stays. The room erupted, but the decision was made. Zarya kept her position by 1 vote from the warrior who hated her most. Later, Garrett found Thrak alone. Why? Why what? Why vote for her when you clearly want her gone? Thrak looked at him. Because she beat me. And I respect strength even when I hate the choices that strength makes. He paused. Also, removing a chieftain mid-spring means chaos. Chaos means vulnerability. Vulnerability means death. I'd rather have a chieftain I hate than no chieftain at all. That's surprisingly strategic. I'm not stupid. I'm just angry. Thrake turned to leave, then stopped. She's making a mistake with you. It'll cost her everything eventually. But until then, she's still my chieftain, and that means something. He walked away, leaving Garrett with the uncomfortable realization that enemies could respect you without liking you. And sometimes that was enough. Summer came with heat and tensions. Human raids increased. Orc retaliations increased. The spiral Zarya had fought to prevent accelerated anyway. And then Commander Harrow came back. This time he didn't come under truce flag. This time he came with 200 soldiers, siege equipment, and orders from the king. Eliminate the Orc threat permanently. The Stoneheart settlement had hours to prepare, maybe less. Zarya called council. We fight or we evacuate. Those are the options. We fight, Thrak said immediately. Other war chiefs agreed. We'll lose, Zarya countered. We have maybe 100 combat-ready warriors. They have twice that plus ranged weapons and fortifications. This isn't a fight, it's a slaughter. Then it's a slaughter, but we don't run. Running isn't cowardice when the alternative is death. Running is always cowardice. Zarya looked ready to argue, but Garrett interrupted. What if I talk to them? He said. Everyone turned to stare. Harrow came for me once under peace terms. Maybe he'll listen again. They're here to kill us, Thrak said, not to talk. Maybe not, but Harrow was my mentor. He offered me a pardon. Maybe he'll offer the same to the clan. Pardons don't exist for orcs. They didn't exist for exiled trackers either, but he offered anyway. Garrett looked at Zarya. Let me try. If it fails, you can fight, but at least try peace first. She studied him. You think you can negotiate with humans who've decided we're monsters? No, but I think I can remind them we're people. That might be enough. It wasn't enough. Garrett walked out under white flag. Harrow met him halfway. Come to beg for your new friends? Harrow asked. Come to ask you not to do this. The king's orders are clear. The orc settlement is a threat. It gets eliminated. They're not a threat. Zarya has spent years preventing violence. She's stopped more raids than she's authorized. She's an orc chieftain who's turned you against your own kind. Harrow's voice was hard. I offered you a way back. You refused. Now you'll face the consequences. The consequence being you'll kill people who've done nothing wrong. They're orcs. They don't have to do anything wrong. They just have to exist. And there it was, the fundamental truth underneath all the politics and carefully worded justifications. Humans hated orcs not for what they did, but for what they were. You used to be better than this, Garrett said, and you used to be loyal. Harrow turned away. You have 1 hour to evacuate civilians. After that, we attack. Garrett went back, delivered the news. Zarya made her decision immediately. Children and elders evacuate north. Warriors stay and delay. Delay for what? Thralk asked. For them to get far enough away that they survive. We'll die. Yes, but they'll live. That's how sacrifice works. The evacuation was chaos. Families torn apart, children crying, warriors saying goodbye to people they'd never see again. Mara supervised medical preparations, talking to her herbs about how inconvenient this all was. Kresh distributed weapons, making sure every warrior had what they needed. Garrett found Zarya in the longhouse. She was strapping on armor. Real armor this time. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Yes, I do. I'm chieftain. If my people die, I die with them. Then I'm staying too." "No, yes. Garrett, I'm with you. That means I'm with your people. I'm not running while they fight. You'll die. Probably, but I'll die for something that matters." She looked at him, then kissed him hard enough to bruise. "I love you," she said, which is inconvenient and impractical and the worst possible timing, but it's true. "I love you too," Garrett said, which doesn't make any sense. But here we are. Here we are. They walked out together to face the attack. The battle was exactly as brutal as expected. 200 trained soldiers against 100 warriors. Orc strength versus human numbers. Rage versus discipline. The orcs held the line for 4 hours, longer than anyone expected. Long enough for the evacuation to succeed, long enough for dozens of warriors to fall. Garrett fought alongside Threk. The war chief who'd hated him now guarded his flank like a brother. When Garrett took an arrow meant for Threk, the chief returned the favor by breaking the archer's neck. "You fight well for prey," Threk said. "You die well for someone who hated me," Garrett countered. "I still hate you, but you're brave. That counts." They kept fighting. Zarya was everywhere at once, directing warriors, reinforcing weak points, leading charges that broke enemy formations. She fought like someone with everything to lose and nothing left to prove. The sun was setting when Harrow found her. They faced each other across corpses and blood and the ruin of everything both had tried to prevent. "Yield," Harrow said. "This is over. It's not over until every warrior here is dead or everyone else is safe. They're safe already. You won. Your civilians escaped. Now yield before you lose everything else." Zarya looked around, counted the warriors still standing. 23 out of 100. She lowered her weapon. "We yield." "Smart choice," Harrow turned to his soldiers. "Take the survivors prisoner. Secure the..." The arrow came from nowhere. Standard issue human bow. Perfect shot. It hit Harrow in the chest. He went down. Chaos erupted. Soldiers broke formation. Some charged. Others tried to protect their fallen commander. The fragile truce shattered instantly. Garrett saw who fired. One of Harrow's own men. Younger soldier. Hatred in his eyes. The soldier reached for another arrow. Garrett put himself between the soldier and Zarya. The second arrow took him in the shoulder instead of her heart. He went down hard, heard Zarya screaming his name, felt her dragging him behind cover, felt blood soaking through his shirt. "Stay with me," she was saying. "Stay with me." "I'm here," he managed. "You're dying." "Maybe a little." "Don't joke. Not now." The fighting continued around them, but Zarya ignored it, focusing entirely on keeping pressure on the wound, on keeping him conscious, on refusing to let him die. Mara appeared, still talking to herself. "Yarrow is going to be very upset about this. I told him we might need extra blood clotting agents." "And did he grow faster?" "No, lazy plant." She worked on Garrett with professional efficiency while narrating to her herbs. Between her skill and Zarya's refusal to let him die, he survived the next hour. When the fighting finally ended, both sides too exhausted to continue, Harrow was alive but barely. The soldier who'd shot him was dead, killed by his own comrades for breaking truce terms. Both armies faced each other across a battlefield where neither had actually won. The treaty negotiations happened 4 days later. Harrow, recovering from his wound, met with Zarya, recovering from hers. They sat across from each other in the ruins of the Longhouse and made choices that would affect thousands. "This has to end," Harrow said. "Agreed, but I can't just retreat. The king wants..." "I don't care what the king wants. Your king wants glory. My warriors want revenge. Neither will get it." Zarya leaned forward. "Here's what happens. Your soldiers leave. We rebuild. Border stays where it is. No raids. No retaliations. Just peace." "For how long?" "Until someone's stupid enough to break it." Harrow considered. "And what guarantee do I have you won't attack the moment we turn our backs?" The same guarantee I have you won't. None. This is trust. Raw, stupid, irrational trust that maybe we're both tired enough of killing to try something different. That's not much of a guarantee. It's the only one I have. Harrow was quiet for a long time. The king will hate this. Your king can hate it from his throne. Meanwhile, his soldiers get to go home alive. That's a victory. Is it? It's the only victory that matters. The treaty was signed, unofficial, unrecognized, just two leaders deciding that enough was enough. Garrett recovered slowly. Arrow wound turned out to be serious but not fatal. Mara spent 4 weeks forcing herbal remedies down his throat while complaining to Rosemary about patient compliance. Zarya stayed with him every day, every night, being there in ways that had nothing to do with nursing and everything to do with refusing to let go. We're alive, Garrett said one evening. Doesn't seem real, Zarya agreed. We're enemies who fell in love. We're survivors of a battle that should have killed us. We're living in a peace that shouldn't exist. She was quiet. But here we are. Here we are. The settlement rebuilt. Slowly, painfully. But it rebuilt. The evacuated families returned. Children who'd lost parents. Warriors who'd lost friends. A community that had survived but bore the cost. Thrak survived, lost his left hand in the fighting, but refused to treat it as defeat. Still have one hand, he told anyone who asked. One hand's enough to hold a weapon. That's all a warrior needs. He was elected war chief again, immediately used his position to enforce the treaty. Any warrior who breaks peace terms answers to me personally, he announced, saying, he announced, and I'm significantly meaner now that I'm bitter about the hand situation. Kresh expanded his collection, added buttons from fallen soldiers, human and orc both. They both chose these buttons, he explained to Garrett. Both sewed them on themselves. Both cared about small things while preparing for big things. That's worth remembering. Mara's herbs survived winter and were, in her words, being insufferable about it. The peace held, not because everyone agreed with it, because everyone was too exhausted to break it. Months passed, then a year. Garrett and Zarya stood together at the settlement's edge, looking out at the forest below. The same view they'd shared a year ago when everything was falling apart. Now everything was tentatively, carefully, not falling apart. Do you regret it? Garrett asked. Everything that happened? Do you? I asked first. She smiled slightly. I regret the deaths. I regret the violence. I regret that so many people had to die for something we could have just talked out. She paused. But I don't regret you. Not for a second. Even though I've made your life harder, especially because of that, anyone can make life easier by avoiding complications. You made life harder by mattering. She looked at him. That's worth the pain. You matter too. I know, we both matter to each other, to people who thought mattering was weakness. She was quiet. Maybe that's how change happens. Not through big declarations or perfect plans, just through small choices. To see enemies as people, to choose connection over hatred, to survive not by fighting harder, but by learning when to stop fighting. That's very philosophical. I'm a chieftain. I'm allowed to be philosophical occasionally. They stood in silence, watching the sunset paint the forest in gold and red. The peace wouldn't last forever. Garrett knew that. Someday someone would break it. Someday the cycle would start again. But maybe it would last a little longer this time. Maybe the next generation would remember that peace was possible because two people had been stupid enough to try it. Maybe hope was irrational, but so was everything else they'd done. Garrett reached for Zarya's hand. She took it. They stood together. Two enemies who'd accidentally become allies, become friends, become something the world didn't have a word for yet. The forest stretched out before them, vast and indifferent and beautiful. What happens now? Garrett asked. Now we keep surviving, Zarya said. Together, despite the world, despite the odds, despite every reason this shouldn't work. That's not much of a plan. It's the only one we have. In the distance, an orc child laughed. A human merchant set up shop at the border crossing. Kresh showed his button collection to a visiting warrior. Mara lectured Rosemary about growth rates, small moments, small acts of survival, small evidence that enemies could become something else if given time, proximity, and the courage to train. Garrett pulled out a dried moon petal, the flower that had almost killed him and had ultimately saved him. It was brittle now, silver white faded to gray, but still whole. I kept this, he said. Reminder that dangerous things can save you if you are willing to survive them. Zarya took it carefully. Some of my warriors still think you poisoned yourself deliberately to trick me into saving you. Did I? No, you were just stupid and desperate. Love that for me, she laughed, rare enough that Garrett treasured it. You know what's funny? Zarya asked. That night in the way station when I held you while you were dying, I told myself it didn't mean anything, that I was just being practical. That body heat was survival strategy, nothing more. She was quiet. And now I realize every choice I've made since then has been about not losing that feeling of mattering to someone who doesn't want anything from me except to keep existing together. That's all I want too. I know. She kissed him gently. That's why this works. They stayed there until the sun disappeared entirely and the stars came out. The world was still broken. The war was still happening somewhere. People were still dying for causes they barely understood. But in this settlement, at this moment, two people who shouldn't exist together had built something impossible. They'd built a future that included both of them. And maybe that was enough. Maybe small acts of impossible love were how the world actually changed. Maybe hope wasn't irrational after all. The night settled around them like a promise. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they had peace. They had each other. They had proof that the world could change if someone was brave enough or stupid enough to take the first step. Blood makes you orc or human, but loyalty, courage, and love, those make you family. And family in the end was all that truly mattered. The moon petal in Zarya's hand caught the starlight, glowed faintly, a reminder of how they'd started. Two people, one dying, one saving, both changed forever by a choice that made no sense. Thank you, Garrett said quietly. For what? For being stupid enough to save me, T. Thank you for being stupid enough to stay. They smiled, two fools who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and built something beautiful anyway. The forest whispered around them. The settlement slept peacefully. And two enemies who'd become something more stood together, watching stars appear one by one in the endless sky. Tomorrow would come with its challenges and complications and the endless work of maintaining peace in a world that preferred war. But tonight they had this. They had each other, and that was enough.